Welcome everyone. I'm really glad to see everybody here in Luce Hall, as well as virtually via Zoom to our very special talk this afternoon. So my name is Stephen Wilkinson. I'm the Millikanny Professor of India and South Asian Studies here at Yale and the Faculty Director of the Macmillan Center. So the Macmillan Center is Yale's focal point for the study of cultures, societies, languages around the world. We train our students to understand the world, to understand the world's languages. We send them out in the world to learn, and we also have the opportunity to bring distinguished visitors here to Yale so that we may learn from them here. Now, I'm really delighted today to introduce our featured speaker, the Mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, and our moderator, Professor Marcy Shore, who is also the Director of Graduate Studies for our very active European and Russian Studies MA program at the European Studies Council. And Marcy organized this event. So Mayor Trzaskowski's title for today's talk is War in Ukraine and a New Transatlantic Agenda. This event is being supported by the George Herbert Walker Jr. Lecture Fund in International Studies here at the Macmillan Center. So this was a fund established in honor of Bert Walker by the Walker family. The Walker family has produced both Bush presidents who were Yale graduates are a part of that family. So I'm glad to note that the Mayor is delivering one of our first in-person Walker lectures since 2019. Mayor Trzaskowski has been the Mayor of Warsaw since 2018. He's a member of the European Committee of Regions and the Board of Eurocities. In 2020, he was the Civic Platform's candidate for the Presidency of Poland. He is a former member of the European Parliament, Vice-Chair of the European People's Party, and in 2014, he served as the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland. And in 2013, as a Minister for Administration and Digitalization in the cabinet of the former Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk. Mayor Trzaskowski was born in Warsaw, where he studied and graduated from the University of Warsaw. In 2004, he obtained his PhD degree in political science. He speaks fluent English, French, Spanish, Russian, and Italian. And moderating his talk today is Professor Marcy Shore. Professor Shore teaches modern European intellectual history here at Yale. Her research focuses on the intellectual history of 20th and 21st century Central and Eastern Europe. She has written many things. She's the translator of Mikhail Glavinsky's The Black Seasons, the author of Caviar and Ashes, A Warsaw Generation's Life and Death in Marxism, 1918-1968, The Taste of Ashes, The Afterlife of Totalitarianism in Eastern Europe, and The Ukrainian Night, An Intimate History of Revolution. She was also in 2018 a recipient of the very prestigious Guggenheim Fellowship for her current book project. So thank you to Marcy for moderating today's talk. The format today is going to be this. We're going to hear from Mayor Trzaskowski first, and then Professor Shore and Mayor Trzaskowski will sit up front for a discussion and a Q&A session that'll give people the opportunity to ask them whatever you like. Thank you both, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Dzień dobry. It is a honor and a privilege to be here at Yale and have an opportunity to talk to you about what's happening right now in my country and in my region, of course, and to talk about the transatlantic relationship and, of course, what kind of impact the situation of today has on transatlantic relations. I mean, first of all, I have to tell you that, as it was mentioned before, I started in European policy, and I was a think tanker for quite a long time and a university lecturer, and I still am at Warsaw University, dealing mostly with European affairs. And I worked in the European Parliament. I was a member of the European Parliament. I was a Minister of European Integration, and then I moved into national politics. Some people say one of the biggest mistakes of my life. And I was a minister, and then I was a member of national parliament, and then I moved to local government. This is pretty unusual because usually it's the other way around. You know, you start with local government, then you do national, then maybe European later on. And of course, everyone was telling me, listen, I mean, finally, that's a job of your life because you can focus on the future. You can actually start building and modernizing your city. And of course, everything you do will leave an impact because that's what happens when you're a mayor of a wonderful city, and Warsaw, of course, is a wonderful city. And you will just focus on modernizing your city. And on top of that, you will not be subjected to that political bickering and partisanship because people will just simply, national media will forget about you for a while, and only when there's a small crisis, maybe they will be reminded of you. And I thought, yeah, well, it's worth a try. And of course, I'm born and bred in Warsaw, so of course that was quite a challenge. After I became mayor, boom, a sewer pipe burst under the Vistula River. So, and by the way, it burst twice. So of course I was mostly focusing my attentions to that, and with the crazy government in place and with the propaganda that they've unleashed, it was not easy. And then when we just got after the crisis, after the first crisis, when we got out of that, of course COVID hit us. 4 waves of it. And just as we were getting out of it, a war happened, which obviously gives you quite a perspective. And sometimes I introduce myself as not as a mayor of Warsaw, but as a minister of crisis situations, because all the time you have to deal with a crisis. But that's politics for you, politics of today. But of course, what happens in Ukraine today is incredibly serious, and it has huge implications for the security of the region, but also for the security of the world. And that's why we need to seriously talk about that. And the thing is that we were warning our friends in Europe and also in America for years. And we were observing Vladimir Putin's career, and for us at least, it was pretty clear who are we dealing with. So we were not misled, even at the beginning of the century, that this guy could be a good Democrat, because it was just enough to study his days in KGB, to study his days in Petersburg, to sort of guess what kind of people what kind of guy we're dealing with. And we were telling our friends in Europe, and we were telling our friends in America, don't do deals with thugs, or at least think about security. Think about making Poland and making Europe more independent from fossil fuels coming from Russia. Think about putting our energy into any democratic endeavor you can, which is going to strengthen our neighbors to the east of Poland, to the so-called post-Soviet sphere, because our Ukrainian friends, our Moldovan friends, at the beginning even our Belarusian friends, were striving towards democracy. And of course, everyone was in the US, but sometimes even in Europe, everyone was sort of lumping us together as Eastern Europeans and thinking that we are no different. Well, we are, because of course we have quite different democratic experiences, but we all wanted the same thing. We wanted to be peaceful, stable, democratic nations. And by the way, Ukraine was promised that when it decided to give its nuclear weapons away. It was guaranteed by the Western powers that the integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine will be protected. And later on, we were trying all the time to convince our friends in Europe and in the US that we should at least buy that security, build an energy union. I will explain in a second what it is. Build a strong Eastern policy of the European Union. I remember I started working in the European Parliament in 2004, just when Orange Revolution hit and everyone was hyped up, for a while. And then we said, okay, now is the moment to build the energy union. And in a few months, the attention waned and people started thinking about something different. And again, we've heard the same spiel. Come on, you're obsessed with Russia. They're such reliable partners. Even in the Soviet times, when it came to gas, when it came to oil, we could rely on them and we could do business with them. And now, with new Russia, why not? And many people were saying, if you were investing in the future of Ukraine, investing in the future of Moldova, trying to promise them European Union membership, not mentioning any security guarantees, then you are actually undermining the security of Europe. And we were saying, you are dealing with thugs, you are dealing with guys who just understand the language of power. And all the time we've heard, you're obsessed. You don't understand the modernity because you're just, there in Eastern Europe, not seeing the bigger picture. But fortunately, we were able to prepare ourselves at least a bit for what was to come. Look at energy union. It was an idea of Donald Tusk, our former prime minister. It was supported, of course, by our politicians. It was realized by our governments. Also, when I was Minister of European Affairs, and before, we were doing quite a lot in the European Parliament. And what we did, for example, we made steps to make sure that we would be building LNG terminals so that we could import gas. What we did inverse flow, okay, and the so-called interconnectors, which means that just 10 years ago, 15 years ago, gas and oil could just flow one way from Russia to Europe. Now we can do the reverse. We started building interconnectors with the Baltic states, with Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and so on and so forth, so that we could transport oil and gas throughout Europe. We also invested in big reservoirs of gas, and now it's an obligation to have those reservoirs for at least 3 months. And we've also strengthened the competition policy of the European Union so that you can go after Gazprom when it is breaking the rules of competition. We've decoupled two very important things. One is extraction of oil, and then the distribution of oil and gas, right? So at least because of our insistence, we're better prepared to what's happening. I mean, as you know, just yesterday, Russia cut gas to Poland and to Bulgaria. And similarly and simultaneously, we were strengthening the eastern dimension of the European Union, investing a lot in those links with our friends to the east. And it was tough. Boy, it was tough. And I remember, talking to our friends, negotiating it, and of course, so many hurdles on the way. And if you mentioned Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, the gas pipe under the Baltic Sea, we were warning our friends, listen, don't get too much dependent on Russia. And again, our arguments were not heard by our German friends. And they were telling us it's a business enterprise, you shouldn't be so insistent. And then what? And then, of course, history proved us right. And of course, this is a very bitter pill to swallow. And now we have a crisis on our hands, and a crisis of global dimensions. What happens is that, of course, Putin has miscalculated, because he thought, first of all, that he would be able to divide the Ukrainian society. He thought that the Ukrainian society will be divided, that many troops will desert, that his army will be able to actually take over Kiev in a few days. He thought that he's going to divide us, because he was remembering 2014 when we've agreed on sanctions, but they were not very serious. And again, I was negotiating them. And when we were telling our friends, God, these sanctions need to be serious. We need to go after the oligarchs. We need to do something about gas and oil. Again, they were saying, no, step by step. And of course, Putin thought that, with such a weak response to Russian aggression in 2014, he thought that he could do it again. And that's what his intelligence was telling him. So the incredible thing is that, of course, he miscalculated when it comes to Ukraine, because it turned out that we have a united response. And by the way, I was just 4 or 5 days before the war, I was in Kiev. And even there, people were telling me, maybe 20-30% of Ukrainian troops will desert, or maybe they will not listen to orders. There will be 2 or 3 important regional leaders who might desert. Nothing of the sort happened. And the Ukrainians really did their lesson. I mean, we've got no time to go into the military aspects of it, but really, after 2014, they've learned their lesson. My favorite thing is that there is an app. If you are a citizen of Ukraine, you have that app which is used to communicate with your government. And now it was turned into an app on which you can inform about Russian troop movements, make pictures, maps, and so on, and send it directly to the authorities. And no one can fake it, because if you don't have a Ukrainian identity, you can't operate that. And the Russians, they were supposed to have brilliant communication devices after the Georgian war, and now, of course, they're using cell phones, because Putin has created a kleptocracy. These guys were just stealing from government. They were not investing in modern equipment. And they're fantastic at doing a little mischief and hybrid warfare, and tactical movement, but it turned out that they're not that good at strategy, thanks God. So that's the lesson we're learning, and of course we should be learning more. Now, he has also miscalculated when it comes to us, but most importantly, he has miscalculated when it comes to the civil society and the power of the social media. Because, I mean, you know, this fight that we're observing is epic. And it's so clear. It's like David and Goliath. It's of biblical proportions. And it's so clear who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. I'm sometimes comparing it for my American audience to your pop culture. You know, you have like this Marvel comic ultimate evil fighting this American everyman who suddenly turns into a hero. Okay, it's so clear. And that's why the response of the civil society, the response of all of us was so clear and so strong. And the pressure exerted on elected leaders was so strong. If someone were to tell me 2 months ago that so many American companies would go out of Russia, so many German, European companies would go out of Russia, I wouldn't have believed, hadn't I seen it. But of course, that's also because of the pressure of the civil society. And here again, Putin has miscalculated because he doesn't understand it. And again, it brings us to the same thesis that, you know, this fight is so clear. In 2014, it wasn't so clear. Or we didn't tell the story well. The narrative was a bit different. And he is miscalculated when it comes to our response, because finally, the European Union, the United States of America, started responding in a concerted and in a tough way, because these sanctions bite. For the first time, we went after the oligarchs. For the first time, we were talking about getting ourselves seriously independent when it comes to Russian fossil fuels. And we are taking some tough decisions. Can we do more? Yes, we can. Those sanctions can be even tougher, but, you know, SWIFT, oil and gas, American and European companies out of Russia, that's huge. And of course, you know, you can always think about whether the glass is half full or half empty, but I think that it was pretty surprising for Putin. And of course, we need to do more. And the important thing is that we have to persevere. And the important thing is that we cannot simply think that it's going to end soon and that then we can relent. And of course, we are facing one of the biggest refugee crises in history, in Europe, but also in the world after the Second World War. You know that just 3 months ago, Poland was 120th when it came to accepting refugees. Some people said 105th because, you know, there are different statistics. Now we are second, soon to be first. That shows you the magnitude of the problem. If you remember the Mediterranean crisis, when Europe was panicking, you know, barbed wire and so on, and people running amok, not knowing how to respond, we had 200,000 people at a peak, 200,000 people coming to Europe. We have 300,000 people who came to Warsaw alone in a matter of a month. So that shows you the magnitude of the problem. And of course, the refugees are vulnerable people by definition, but we have the most vulnerable because these are usually mostly young women with kids. I have 120,000 kids in Warsaw. I have 280,000 kids in my schools. And because we have granted courageously, we've granted Ukrainians a citizen-like status, they have access to free education, to free healthcare, and to free social protection. That means that we should be accepting 120,000 kids to our schools. We have enrolled already 20,000. And now we come to the most important part of my message to you, is that what we should do with it. I mean, the most important thing is that there is no strategy, guys. There is no strategy on a Polish level, there is no strategy on a European level, there is no strategy on an international level. Most of what you see is improvisation. Most of what you see is not a miraculous government, central government dealing with it. It's the people. The people have accepted Ukrainians to their homes. Most of us in Poland. You don't see, I mean, people come from the US, from Europe, from different places, specialists in migration, and you know, they're amazed. They say, okay, where are the refugees? Because there are no refugee camps, huge refugee camps. There are no pitch tents in parks. There are no people on the streets because they're at our homes. But of course, this solidarity, which is amazing, cannot be kept without a strategy for months and years. Because, you know, people accepted Ukrainians for 2, 3, 4 months, but not for for 8 or 9. Of course, some of them, most of them stay with their friends and with their families so they can, because we had a huge Ukrainian diaspora in Poland before that, but some of them, stay with complete strangers. So we need a strategy. We need a relocation scheme in Europe where it will be coordinated by the European Union, where different countries made pledges, and then someone needs to coordinate it. Because a month ago, I was calling, in the middle of the night, I was calling different mayors from Poland and from Europe and telling them, please, take 300, take 200 guys, send us a few buses, because we were overwhelmed. And this government is not asking for a strategy, and it is not authorizing the European Union to work, because of course they want to, get all the political credit. And I keep telling them, guys, no government will be able to deal with such a crisis. And of course, that's why we need a push from the Americans, from our European friends, in order to have a strategy, because we have lots of UN agencies working on the ground, we have European agencies working on the ground, but it's haphazard, it's piecemeal, because the government is just picking this service, this help, and so on. We are having our own strategy in Warsaw, but that's not enough. Because, if I have a strategy about education, I told the Minister of Education, guys, we cannot accept 120,000 kids overnight. Most of them should do distant learning on a Ukrainian platform. And that's what the Ukrainian Education Ministry wants, right? That makes more sense. But there is no strategy. So we are doing it ourselves. In Warsaw, we are enrolling people to our schools, but we're also building those places in which they can learn online. We're getting equipment from donors and so on. But of course, because Warsaw is also the only city in Poland which has preschools for free, because that was part of my electoral program, that creates a huge pull factor. And again, without a strategy, it's going to be very difficult to deal with that. So strategy, 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 both on a national and a European level. We have done a lot in the European Union to regulate the status of refugees. But these guys, according to the European law, are not refugees. They're displaced people in need of temporary protection. Different directives apply. So again, I'm going to give you an example. If you're a refugee and if you get registered in Poland, if you go to Germany, then you lose any social protection, because the European Union wants to fight with secondary movements and with a possibility to choose the country of your asylum, because that would mean that everyone would go to Germany or to Sweden because that's where the conditions are best. But these guys, again, are not refugees. So for example, they ask me, if I register, do I lose my social rights if then I go to the Netherlands or to Germany? And I cannot answer them because we don't have one system in Europe on that. So that's why we need a European strategy. And I could go on and give you some other examples of that. And of course, when it comes to support, we need that support not only to go to the central government, but we need that support to go to the non-governmental organizations. By the way, exactly the same non-governmental organizations that now save our day were the ones that were deprived of financing by the populist government. Those who help with refugees, those who help with women's rights, children trafficking, LGBTQ community, and so on and so forth. Those are the guys who are now helping us and now are saving the day. So the money should go to refugees, to non-governmental organizations, and also to us. And that's also the message that I'm trying to sell in Europe and to our American friends. And now finally, in the last few minutes, about geopolitics, because everyone is asking the same questions. What's going to happen? We don't know what's going to happen. And you've heard, because I assume that you are interested in what's happening if you're here. You've heard Lavrov, you heard Putin just yesterday saying that they might escalate, that those myths that there is a Polish-American plot to send our soldiers into Ukraine and so on and so forth. This is really worrying. And of course, these guys are threatening to escalate. They're escalating already in the East. They're threatening to maybe go to another level. But I tell you one thing. I mean, the thugs and bullies, and some of us know it from our neighborhood and from our high school, understand only the word of strength, or the reality of strength. So we need to stay united. We need to send clear signals to Russia. We shouldn't lose it from sight, because again, I'm afraid that after 2, 3, 4, 5 months, people will turn their attention to something different. And of course, the end game is very difficult to foresee, because maybe Putin is looking for a face-saving exercise, we don't know, but what if he finds one and then it's unacceptable to our Ukrainian friends? What do we do then? And of course, what do we do with the crisis which is at our hands, the humanitarian crisis, because we've opened our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, and we will keep on doing so, but we probably are going to have a second wave. I've just 5 days ago, before coming here, I talked to people from Donbas, and they were telling me, we were there for 7-8 years in the war zone, and we didn't move, but after what we've seen in Bucha, Irpin, we decided to move. And they are moving to Poland. So of course we cannot do it alone. We need assistance and we need help. And of course that has huge implications for our security. There's always a silver lining, because the important stuff is also that, the centuries of historical experiences can be turned overnight, and we can build a much sounder and better foundation for our relations with our Ukrainian friends. This is incredibly important for the stability of the region and for the chance of those post-Soviet states to be integrated into the European community. But the important thing is also that some of them will stay in Poland. Many of them will go back with completely different expectations, building a democratic state. I meet them on the ground, and at the beginning, and I speak Russian, so it's a bit more easy. And they look at me, and I tell them I'm a mayor, I want to help, and so on in Russian. And most of them don't believe me. A mayor at a railway station with no security guards speaking to me, and everything's for free. We need to ask our Ukrainian volunteers to explain that this is not a scam, that I don't want to cheat them out of their money. But these expectations will be carried back, we hope, and that will allow our Ukrainian friends to create a democratic society in Ukraine. So that's the positive angle to it. But of course, still this huge geopolitical problem is ahead of us, and we need to get our heads together and try to resolve it, and it's not going to be easy. So I'll stop here, guys, because I know that you want to probably ask quite a few questions, and Marcy as well, so that we can move fluidly to the second part. And I always finish all my lectures and all my talks the same way today and in this day and age. Slava Ukraini.
I have the feeling of a tear in time that you have at dramatic historical moments, the sense that one world has ended, and whatever happens next, we're going to be in another world. A couple days before the invasion started, our friend Slava Vakarchuk, who I'm sure you know, the Ukrainian rock star who spent a semester here at Yale, so many of you know him, called, and I said, Slava, what is the atmosphere like in Kiev? And he said, well, Marcy, imagine a synthesis between Florida in October 1961 during the Cuban Missile Crisis and Central Europe between the Munich Agreement of 1938 and the invasion of Poland in 1939. It's something like that. And there was a sense that nobody knew what was coming, but one of the things that I think Ukrainians and Poles share is an understanding that everything is possible. Americans don't have this. Americans think there are constraints on reality. After Trump was elected, people are walking around saying, okay, this is bad, this is very bad, but we're going to get through it. We have checks and balances. Checks and balances was repeated like a yoga mantra. Whereas East Europeans, I feel like, know that everything can look normal, but it can turn on a dime, and you have to somehow be prepared for that, even if it's impossible to be prepared. So my first question is that, given that tear in time, what has surprised you most that you would not have been able to conceive of 3 months ago?
Well, quite a few things. I mean, I've just tried to talk about it for half an hour, how surprising it was for many of us at the end of the day. Because, we all knew that that something is brewing. And we were also informed about it, and we took it seriously. But everyone I talked to 5 days before the war in Kiev was telling me it's going to be another hybrid warfare, a bit of, but no one expected a full-out war, seriously. I mean, so that of course was surprising. But what really surprised me is this incredible resilience of the Ukrainian people. And when they come to Warsaw, they're so proud. Most of them just want to work And they say we do not want to rely on anyone. We just want to earn our upkeep. And this is incredibly heartening and amazing. But also the response, the concerted and unequivocal response of the West because of this pressure of the social media. I mean, if someone were to tell me, I told you about it, just 2 months ago that this pressure would be so important, I wouldn't believe that. Now the question, of course, is whether that is going to be continued, and that's a big question. So there are quite a lot of surprises. The Polish people didn't surprise me. Because after years of this populist government who was trying to fight with and threaten everyone with refugees and threaten everyone with the LGBT community and threaten everyone with all kinds of minorities because they always need an enemy, I knew that there is this instinct of solidarity that we have in our DNA. By the way, I negotiated as a Minister of European Affairs that we would accept 7,000 refugees in the Mediterranean crisis. And the populist government was telling us that they're going to change the way we live, 7,000. And at a moment, 7,000 were crossing our border in 10 minutes. So that also shows you, the level of manipulation. It's quite a lot of surprises.
Okay. So I'll ask one more quasi-self-interested question, which is that some of us here, like myself among them, have been in the role of the cultural mediators and the translators trying to explain Eastern Europe to Americans. And if this were an ordinary situation, I would feel like this is going extraordinarily well. We've never gotten so much attention. The journalists are asking better and better questions here. We're better able to connect our Ukrainian colleagues with American editors. And I'm still asking myself, what could we do better? What do you have the impression that there are things here in America that Americans by and large don't yet understand well enough that are crucial that we should be on point about?
Well, again, of course, but listen, President Biden was in Warsaw, where I had a chance and an honor to show him the place where we register Ukrainians. And the strongest words possible about defending every inch of NATO territory. I went to the east on numerous occasions, and the Patriot missiles, everywhere. There are American soldiers, the 82nd, but not only, everywhere. The reality changed so much, and the response of the West and the response and the interest of the American society is unbelievable. Listen, I've seen all my friends keep asking me, calling me. I see Ukrainian flags on all social media. I see in New York all the Russian samovar and vodka places turning into Ukrainian samovar and vodka places. The behavior of celebrities and so on and so forth. This is unheard of, and the level of interest. So I'm not sure that we can do more. The important thing is that that we draw a lesson from it, okay, and that we translate it into action, and that we explain that this has huge ramifications for our security. And by the way, not only for Russia and Ukraine, because all the thugs in the world, all the dictators are looking at it, and they're thinking, okay, the West sometimes can pull it together, and they can be tough, they can respond in a uniform fashion. Okay, maybe being aggressive costs a lot. Maybe we should rethink it. That's also the reality of today. Let's hope. So I guess, and when I've seen all the American journalists in Warsaw, and really well informed. I never had so much airtime on American television in my life, of course, And it's not only about me. Of course, politicians always talk about themselves. Fortunately, in America, you're allowed to do that. but there is this window of opportunity to inform, but also to draw conclusions from, okay, and to explain what's what, and to explain that we need to be united, that we need to draw conclusions from it, to offer Ukraine a European perspective seriously, which should have never happened, to make ourselves independent of fossil fuels coming from Russia. Today I was just elected for the board of the Covenant of Mayors where we fight with climate change. And I say, this is the moment where we should seek for synergies to save our planet, to fight with climate change, to make ourselves independent of fossil fuels in general, and fossil fuels coming from Russia. Okay, we need a transition period, of course. But because it's not going to happen overnight, but that should, the pandemic and the crisis in Russia should push us, all of the decision makers, into making the right decisions. And on top of that, that also allows us, to see who's who. Remember Trump and how he cozied up to some Russian politicians? Remember Salvini, Le Pen, the populist government in Poland also liking those populists who were financed by Russia? Let's draw conclusions from it, Some of them did. Suddenly, like half a year ago, we were telling the populists in Poland, why have you removed all the European flags from your ministries? And they're only Polish ones. By the way, the Polish flag is the most beautiful in the world. But why have you removed the European ones? They're back. All of the European flags are there. And all the NATO flags are there. Good. They're learning a lesson. So we should also learn a lesson. And this is the thing we should be doing. Explaining to the American people, explaining to the Europeans, guys, come on, hello, crisis. Imagine if Trump was president of the United States now. Jesus Christ almighty. People are asking me, aren't you afraid? And I'm saying, if President Zelensky is not panicking, I'm not panicking either. But thanks God, we have the leaders we have. Imagine Le Pen won France. So we should be drawing conclusions. The electoral process is not a game. Many people dislike mainstream political parties. I understand that. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, most of the time, we vote for lesser evil. Most of the time, we need to vote with our brain at the end of the day, not only with our heart. So this is the point we should be driving home. And believe you me, people understand it in the US. 5 years ago, when I was talking about problems with democracy, I was seeing it in my friend's eyes. Yeah, this guy from Barbarian East, what does he know about democracy? Trump was elected, and suddenly my American friends started understanding me. The attack on the Capitol, and everyone understands me. And by the way, Poland should be the strongest democracy in Europe now. We cannot afford a weakest link on our eastern border. So this is another point we should be driving home, and I say it in every conversation that I have in the US, that now, if someone is undermining democracy, if someone is undermining the rule of law, if someone is marginalizing Poland or any other country in the European Union, is doing something against our most important national interest. Because we need to be strong in Poland, in Hungary, in Slovenia, in France, but also, of course, in the United States of America. So again, maybe I'm just, an optimist. But we also have to think about drawing conclusions from that.
Let's take some questions from the audience. Zhenya. I think Zhenya's also taking questions from
I'm also taking questions from the audience. So
let's grab 3 or 4 because I'm a politician. I love the tone of my voice.
I will hijack agenda here. Okay. I'm from Ukraine and from Eastern Ukraine.
Great.
And first of all, thank you. I have friends also in Warsaw and Krakow and Poznan and residing right now, and more friends fighting, of course. And thanks for this standing. It's also very important. Just a few minutes ago, U.S. House of Representatives voted to support land lease. With the landslide 417 support, which is great. You were talking about the basically some of the side of what U.S. actually doing right now. It's security for Europe, security for energy right now, which is like. And now there's a sort of terrorism right now happening from the Russian side. But is there like a core idea for the strategy of security in Europe? Because you have Germany as incapacitated as United Nations Security Council, and you have few other countries which are, well, like Hungary and Austria, which are behaving like that nothing happens. And is there like a core one single idea outline for this strategy to build security, both physical and on energy side? Yeah, and I will come later with the more people are asking about border crises from Belarus. Yeah, and some part of my question is also like how to deter crisis from Russian side, but I don't think that this is like very broad question. So this is just about also about security, preventing future crises, because Russia is not going anywhere.
Well, I'll try to be telegraphic because there are, as if three parts in your question. So, first of all, I'll start with the with Belarus and so on and so forth, guy, because I've been asked that question quite a lot on American media as well. What changed, right? First of all, we have a populist government, right? My government, when I was minister, we were participating in European solidarity when it came to refugees. We were able to accept refugees. What we just didn't like was a mathematical formula to distribute refugees according to quotas, because we thought it was a bad idea, and it was a bad idea. Because politically, you can't simply say, stand in front of your people and say, how many refugees will you accept? I don't know. There is this magical formula invented by the European Commission, maybe 20,000, maybe 50,000. That's a no-go, a non-starter. But we were there, building policy. We were at a high table, negotiating and so on and so forth. That changed, okay? And of course, as I told you, the populists always need an enemy. So that was their response to the Mediterranean crisis. Now, the Belarusian crisis and the border was different because it was mostly engineered by Putin and by Lukashenko, who wanted to destabilize Poland. He wanted to destabilize Europe. But of course, again, the populist government wanted to play a card and wanted to have a political win out of that. So that's why they started building a wall. They started, behaving in a way which meant that they weren't even helping children who were dying in the woods. Okay, but of course now the situation is completely different because everyone understands that Ukrainians fight also for our freedom, and for the first time in years there is a bipartisan agreement that we need to help. And here, on the most part, we are on the same page with the government. Okay. It doesn't mean that the Belarusian problem ceased to exist, because, by the way, 8% of all the 3 million who came to Poland are non-Ukrainian, and it's a hot potato for the government, okay? And by the way, when Ukrainians go to Germany, they're all welcomed, but if there's someone with a Nigerian or Syrian passport, they're turned back to Poland, which also is a problem. Secondly, when it comes to your question about divisions and so on and so forth. Yes, there are divisions, true. But I mean, again, if someone were to tell me 3 or 4 months ago, that lethal weapons would be provided for Ukrainians by everyone, including the Germans, okay, after months of agonizing and so on and so forth, but at least, yeah, but I'm not going to defend them, okay? I don't want to defend, because it's true that there is no German leadership at this moment. It is true that the whole German political class disappointed us because we were telling them repeatedly not to do the things that they were doing. So I'm not going to defend them, but hopefully they're getting their act together. By the way, because of the Greens, which is one of the biggest paradoxes of history. Thank you. I'm thanking the German Green Party so that they are courageous and that they know where they need to adapt their policy, okay? But of course there are Hungarians, and we know them. No one knows Viktor Orban better than I do. And of course it is a problem. Although at the end of the day, they weren't blocking, they haven't blocked a single decision of the European Union, the Hungarians. Because, this guy is wonderful at playing different games, okay? Now, of course, the question is, what comes next? Because we need to start making ourselves independent of fossil fuels. And here the Hungarians say that they will not allow for that. And of course, there's this idea of some of our partners that they will start paying Putin in rubles Okay, so are they in the Eurozone or are they in the ruble zone? I don't know. That was a tweet of my president of my party, Donald Tusk, because it's a pretty apt question. But again, I mean, it's the pressure from the people which I hope is going to change it, okay? And it is changing it. So the only thing is, and I'm worried about it, how persistent will we be? Whether that's not gonna end in a month or 2 or 3. What I'm afraid about the end game. What if Putin thinks that, okay, a part of Donbass is enough, a quarter to Crimea, and he stops the war? I'm afraid that then maybe many of our partners will say, oh, okay, fine, great. No, it's not going to be great, okay? But of course, we also need to be realistic, we need to be cautious, but we need to be tough. And if there is any end game, first we need to listen to President Zelensky, okay? If it's a hero, he's a hero, then listen to him, okay? Because I'm afraid that in a few months, again, there will be a lot of pressure on Zelensky. And I don't want to go back to the Minsk agreements and what kind of implications it had for the security of Europe and for the future of Ukraine, which was, by the way, rammed down the throat of the Ukrainian government by our German and French colleagues, okay? But hopefully everyone learns the lesson, and at the end of the day, seriously, if you were to tell me 2 or 3 months ago what the response of the West would be, it's still, it's pretty surprising that we got our act together and that we know what we're doing, that we're providing weapons and so on. But of course, we need to do more. That's for sure. Okay.
Max,
let's grab a few more.
Yeah. Should we take a few together?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Maximus and okay. So 3 of you here.
Just go, guys.
Yeah. Just go ahead.
Welcome, Yale. Good to have you here, man. My name is Max. I come from Vilnius, Lithuania, not far away. Not from where you come from. And you talked a lot about strategy, an important strategy. You clearly are a great fan of strategy. And you still remain the figure of national politics in Poland, right? Mm-hmm. And not only because of presidential elections before, but generally, right? And I wonder, in a little bit more than a year from now, you have parliamentary elections in your country happening, right? And clearly, inflation will continue to rise, and even stagflation will continue to rise across the European Union, including in Poland. The immense amount of migration that we see right now, and refugees and displaced people, can also cause a certain concern among popular constituencies in Poland if it lasts longer than just 2 or 3 months, right? And so there is a certain reason to think that in 2023, in fall, when the election happened, Platforma may be in a very challenging position, that the ground for support of populism and support of Prawo i Sprawiedliwość can be still substantial. So what have you learned since the last elections, either parliamentary or presidential, that you will adopt in your new strategy for your party and generally for liberal-minded forces in Poland in order to change the balance of power in 2023?
Gotcha. 2 more questions.
Hello. My name is Michał, and I have a question about more of a developmental part of the energy security architecture that you mentioned. So essentially, there's quite a lot of talk about the accession of Ukraine into the EU. It's still quite a far road ahead, especially for the Ukrainians. And as for Russia, it's pretty much implementing a Morgenthau Plan 2.0, in which essentially all the Western firms are withdrawing from Russia. Which is studied at Yale by Professor Sonnenfeld and his team. And essentially, we see that the security infrastructure in Europe should be, and the developmental part of the security infrastructure in Europe should be emphasized here. So how do you see the chances for Ukraine to join the EU and the future of aid to potentially to Ukraine after war and maybe potentially democratic Russia?
Mm-hmm. And 3rd question.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the question, and thank you for your time coming out here. My name is Dmitry. My question is, you already started to touch upon the previous refugee crisis, and in your opening remarks, you mentioned this idea of building forward. So you talked about the energy infrastructure, and you talked about independence, et cetera, and being prepared. So will Poland be prepared, and will Europe create an infrastructure system for the next refugee crisis? So you mentioned, certain dissatisfaction with numbers between 7,000 and 50,000. Well, are those numbers now out the door because experience proves to us that we can handle much more than that. And so when the next crisis comes, and it's not from Ukraine, but it's again from the more, let's say, common places where these crises occur, will Europe be able to receive these refugees? And of course, with that, kind of going to my friend Maximus's question, with the populist governments, not just the Polish one, looking to score points on this, a lot of the points that have been used as criticism for peace, right? That the LGBTQ rights, women's rights, judicial reform, etc. That those topics have kind of become buried, and I think that's probably to a great they're very happy about that. So how do we, or what is your plan as you are a member of the opposition party to see that those points remain salient and make sure that Europe is prepared and is welcoming to people who happen to not be Europeans next time?
Gotcha. Okay, so first of all, when it comes to the European perspective for Ukraine, I mean that's a very good question, because I think that things have changed in the heads of a lot of European politicians. So for the first time, because they were telling us it's impossible, Ukraine, Moldova, not now, and you've seen the progress of the negotiations with the Balkan states and so on and so forth. So now is the moment. That's the window of opportunity to speed it up. Of course, it took us more than a decade from the first declaration to actually enter the European Union, and from the association agreement to the membership, more than 13 years. But of course, now is the moment to drive that point home and to start the process. But again, you know for how long Turkey has been negotiating membership with the European Union, from at least 1968. So, but now's the moment, and that's my answer. And now we should be driving it and keeping it on the agenda of the European Union, because that's the only way forward. And by the way, the Russians even said, NATO, no, European Union, okay. By the way, the membership in the European Union would be much more, maybe not much more, but as serious a guarantee to the Ukrainians that they will remain a part of the West as anything else. When it comes to what you said about refugees, I don't think that Europe will ever be ready, in a sense that welcoming and so on. This is the hottest topic ever, the hot button issue. Look at the United States and so on and so forth. We are better prepared than we used to be, because finally we have a lot of instruments. We have the instruments for helping in the third countries. We have instruments when it comes to relocating immigrants within, dealing with secondary movements. We have European border guards. We've done quite a lot of things in order to prepare ourselves, for different type of crises. We have all of those readmission agreements. Finally, we have one migration policy in Europe, because it used to be completely fragmented. But are we prepared? If we're going to have millions and millions of additional refugees, of course, it always is going to be a political problem. And it is politically incorrect to say, but in a Polish case, these guys look like us, they speak a very similar language, there's this cultural affinity, and they fight for our freedom. So of course it is easier to accept that than to accept someone else. And of course it is very difficult to wage a populist fight against it, because no one would believe in it, and even the populists realize that. So I mean, unfortunately, I don't think that we will ever be politically prepared for that. But of course, a lot is changing in people's mentality, because they see that 7,000 it's not a problem, right? Then, and of course, the non-Ukrainians, I said that in my speech, this is a hot issue for the government, what to do with them. And of course, there are questions of integration. I mean, now everyone is saying, Poland did a great job, but in a month or 2 or 3 or 4, if no one help us out, we will have a backlash. And then there are questions that if there is no strategy, what should I do with 120,000 kids? I cannot accept them all to our schools, right? And then there is a question of integration, and then there is a question, how do we envisage the future, it's hellishly complicated. And by the way, if we don't do anything about climate change, we're going to have hundreds of millions of people on the move. So that's, again, this is a moment to drive that point home. Now, about Polish situation. Well, I could tell you, I draw one very important conclusion, and here I differ from some of my colleagues, because I think that we need to build a bigger tent. You know, I would submit to you that we're not going to win an election without political parties. And of course, my own civic platform is a linchpin of it, and is the most important, right? Because it is the most serious, it is the most experienced, it has good people prepared to govern and so on. But a lot of people, especially young people, dislike mainstream parties, so we need to do something about it. Look at PiS and look at the populists. They are, as we say in Polish, they're playing on different pianos at the same time, okay? So they've strengthened the party, but they were building foundations, they were building discussion clubs, they were building internet platforms, they were doing grassroots movements, you know, they were doing everything. And some of my colleagues say, platform, platform, platform. I love it. I say, we can chant together. But I told them, no, we also need to add on. We need to consolidate the local mayors. And that's what we did. We have an association, the movement that I've initiated of local mayors. Most of them are independent. But we stick together, because if we don't, they will be either threatened by PiS or bought by PiS, or they will simply stop engaging in national politics, right? And this is, again, coming from my presidential campaign, because in many places, I was there and the local leader was with me, and that's why my result was so good. I'm going to give you one example from East and Southern Poland, and why I lost the election. First of all, you know, there was no even playing field, you know. But one of the reasons is that in our strongholds we get 70%, and PiS gets 30% in the big cities. In their strongholds, in the east and the rural areas, there's in Podkarpackie, in many counties, I got 10 or 15, and Duda the president of Poland, got 85 or 90%. There's one county in Podkarpackie where there is a mayor who used to be a cop in Warsaw, and he went and he said to the priest, I mean, if you keep on preaching politics from the pulpit, you're not going to help renovate the church. Stop it. Okay? You keep on talking about Trzaskowski. It was because of Warsaw that after the flood, you know, Warsaw, as a sign of solidarity, they paved the roads and they help us out. And don't believe those lies about him trying to change the way we live. I know him. He has a respect for tradition and so on and so forth. In this county, I got 35%. Okay? Impossible to win, but 35, not 10 or 15. And when I go there, they tell me, I mean, if you come in your political hat, it's going to be difficult. If you come as a mayor, great. No problem. And thirdly, we've done a Campus Poland initiative where we invited 1,000 people, young people from all over Poland, socially active. And for a week, we were talking about the topics that they wanted to talk about. So they wanted to talk about women's rights, global warming, artificial intelligence, and so on. And we were talking about, I was there for a week. Many of them were afraid that we were going to indoctrinate them. No, it was an open debate. And many of my colleagues were there. We invited politicians, we invited experts, we invited rock stars, we were having concerts, we were having sports activities. And we've created an alternative grassroots movement and a network, which works. And now when I go to Podkarpackie, okay, of course I'm meeting with Platforma, but that's not enough because they're convinced people. But I'm meeting with the local leaders and I'm meeting with the young people. And they're local, so they tell me, those guys they will vote for PiS forever. You can, of course, talk to them, but be aware, you know. These guys are yours, so say hi, but don't spend time because, you know, they're Platforma guys. Those are the guys you need to be convincing, you know. So what I'm saying is that I am absolutely convinced that, you know, the opposition parties, first of all, we all have to be more mature and we have to collaborate and start trusting each other. That's very important. But we have to build a bigger tent and do what populists are doing, you know, try to reach out and talk to the people who are not convinced. And by the way, at the campus thing, you know, 80% of the people had nothing to do with politics. They were political in the sense that they were active, but they were not party political. Many of them hate my party. Some of them, not many, but some hate me. But they were there. And we had Balcerowicz there, you know, the founder of the shock therapy. For half of the young kids, he was a hero, he was God. For half of them, he was devil incarnate because they were, you know, from the left. You should have seen the discussion. Whoa! I mean, how hot it was. And Balcerowicz was, you know, like this because he's God at his university. And suddenly he was asked difficult questions. And guess what? They were pushing politicians who were very cautious, some of my friends, to be much more, you know, courageous because they were pushed so much. And politicians are not that used to having an open room and having, you know, hundreds of questions and then they need to answer them, you know. So, I mean, that's my only answer. Talk to the unconvinced, do the grass movement, be with the people. And that's a lesson from being a mayor. Because you're just accountable. You walk the streets and all the time you're asked questions. No other question, no other answer. But I remain hopeful.
Do we have time for another question? Okay, yes, please.
My name is Dorota. I applaud you, and as part of being Polish, I know Poland is helping refugees a lot. My question for you as a mayor of Warsaw, I know that some towns started saying comes April 1st, they will stop helping the big expo places to have places for Ukrainian refugees, and they decrease amount per day, how much they spend on a Ukrainian refugee. I know that the good weather is coming, a lot of motels, hotels are gonna need the tourist money. What is the immediate plan for Warsaw, you as a president, and for other cities in Poland to help the refugees and relocate them somewhere else?
Great. Two more questions.
Mr. President, I would like to know from your perspective how the whole crisis, I mean, coming back to your question also, how this crisis will actually impact the budget of Warsaw, and what is your plan? What are the countermeasures that you would like to take, given the non-cooperative government that we have?
Wonderful, both great questions. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Mayor. My name is Victor. As you rightly noticed in your lecture, the current government, Polish government, has experienced an incredible turnaround in its public image and international standing in just the last 2 months. So from an outlier marked by rule of law issues, abuse of gay and women rights, challenging international investors and their property rights, and a very damaging reaction to the US presidential election 2020, they became a strategic partner of Brussels and Washington, celebrated for a generous and courageous response to the current crisis. All of that in just 2 months. My question is, do you, as one of the leaders of the Polish opposition that has been fighting those abuses for the last 7 years, feel like the government is getting a pass from the West and is being let off the hook, essentially?
Okay. My job is that they don't. Well, I mean, you know, of course, the most important thing is that we resolve the problem, and I'm collaborating with this government, you know, and when it's below the radar, sometimes it's even a good cooperation, okay. But of course, they're, you know, pushing most of the responsibility our way, and they promise the money, and it's going to be like with the pandemic, that at the beginning we were collaborating, and then they were pushing all the responsibility our way, and they were taking money away from us. And one day they were saying, I'm responsible for 11 hospitals. One hospital needs to be COVID. Okay, fine. And then they say, no. All of your hospitals need to have a COVID ward. Okay? Okay. And then they suddenly set up, you know, a hospital at a national stadium, and they pay all the doctors 3 times more, so all the doctors start working there, and they don't have enough equipment, so when there's a serious case, all of those guys come to me. Okay? That's a lack of strategy. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen this time around. So I don't have my own relocation strategy, because we need a relocation strategy not only on a national level but on a European level, okay? And I am telling the government exactly what you've just told us, and I'm telling all my friends in the European Union and in America that this is going to end. We cannot do it indefinitely. That's why we need to have a relocation scheme. That's why we might need more reception centers created by the UN agency who know best how to do it. We don't have to invent a wheel. We have all of those guys on the ground. But they're just not authorized to work because there is no coordination and there is no call for help. There's no memorandum of understanding between the central government and them. And that's what we need because, of course we are retrofitting office spaces. I decided to keep those tents, even though now we don't have an influx of refugees, open to prepare for a second wave. But what can I do? I can prepare for 10,000 people, 15,000 people. I cannot prepare for another 100,000. And what if many people will simply say, okay, I cannot accept Ukrainians anymore at my home? Okay, now of course there's a problem with those hotels that you mentioned and so on. That's why we need strategy. That's why we need help from the European Union, financial help and relocation strategy, okay? Now, when it comes to the government washing their hands in, first of all, we need to keep the pressure on those guys, also for security reasons, because we need to be a strong democracy. And I know, and that's, I told that to President Biden when I had a chance. I told that to Secretary Blinken, and they know it. I've told that on the Hill. I'm telling that to all my European friends, so that they need to remember that. And I also give them ready-made recipes. I tell them, listen, if you are connecting EU money with rule of law, you put me in a schizophrenic situation. Because I cannot say that I want the money to be, I don't want the money to be blocked. See, I'm so used to propaganda that I don't even say the sentence which can be cut out of context. So I don't want the money to be blocked, of course, and frozen, but they need to be tough on the government. So I tell them, so give a bit of money to us directly, to the local governments. It's as easy as that. It's a win-win. Populists do not win cities. Make a huge program that takes away diesel-powered buses from the streets of European cities and give them directly to the cities which are ambitious. Mm-hmm. By the way, Warsaw was just announced one of the 100 green cities in Europe. Mm-hmm. We are in it. Okay, again, a bit of direct financing. That's what I was fighting for the past 3 years. So that, there are solutions, and that's what I'm telling our American friends. Most of them understand it, but many of them, especially in Europe, would want to use that as a pretext because they are fed up with having to ask the peace government about it. But it's the job of ours, the job of also public opinion to keep on pushing and to explain. And that's like, to my American friends, that's what I'm saying. I'm not telling them values, because, although the Ukrainians are actually dying for those values now. They're dying exactly for the values that are undermined in some of our countries. But I tell them that they need a strong ally, they need a credible ally, they need a democratic ally. They cannot afford, no one can afford Poland to be now a weak democracy. So this is an incredibly important issue. And that's why this pressure needs to be kept up. And that's why it is so important. And hopefully, this is not going to, most of my colleagues, most of my interlocutors understand that. And there hasn't been such a strong effect of, rallying the flag as some people expected. So that gives us hope that at the end of the day, people, Poles, when it comes to elections, that they will take the right decisions, okay? And that they will not forget about what this government was doing. Okay, and it's also, of course, our job to make sure that happens. Okay. Did I omit any question? I think I've answered yours. Yes. Okay, I think I addressed all the questions. Yeah, guys. Yeah, I think yes. It's up to you. I can still answer.
Okay. There are actually two. One, I will summarize because people are
sure. Shoot.
So first question regarding LGBTQIA+ community rights in Poland and how you see their future in Polish society regarding current events and within the internal policies of Poland. And the second is more grounded to what's going on right now. That many the suggestion is that many Polish people are going to be affected by cut of the gas, and who that will be and what will be the repercussions.
Got it. And last question.
Edyta Bojanowska, dziękuję bardzo za wykład. I have a question, and maybe a broader zoomed out question. Back to the point that you've been really stressing about the need for strategy. So if we talk about European strategy in the wake of the war in Ukraine, or well, it's not really in the wake because the war is still going on. And I would love to get your thoughts about broader geopolitical dimensions of strategy. That is European Union's policy or strategy on relations with Russia. What are key components of that strategy that you would like to see in place? That's one. And I'm asking that in addition to weaning European countries weaning themselves of fossil fuels, and especially Russian fossil fuels. So what are some of the other important components of such a European strategy? And I guess the second question is, who should be deciding it, and how should this strategy be decided? Can you think of what, according to you, would be a good mechanism of arriving at a viable and productive European strategy? Of course, ideally one that is free from Hungarian veto and things of that nature.
Well, I mean, there is no other place to make a strategy by the European Council, where all the heads of governments meet, and that's the place to establish a strategy according to the treaties. And of course, there just needs to be enough pressure on the Hungarians and all the others to not to water it down. This is the most important thing. And of course, the important thing is to keep up sanctions in place, to strengthen Europe when it comes to its defense and security dimension. To make Europe independent of fossil fuels and speed up the transition, and also to do it in a way which is smart. To offer a serious perspective to Ukraine and to Moldova when it comes to the membership of the European Union, at least those two countries, but speed up the accession, and of course to adopt a common policy when it comes to displaced people and have a relocation scheme, because this is immensely important. So most of the elements of the strategy are there. It's now just a question to get them together and to put them together, and not to allow anyone to water it down. As simple as that, or as difficult as that. And now, yeah.
So when you say stronger military, do you mean within the structures of NATO or outside of the structures?
Both. I mean, we have the structures ready, because we do not want to duplicate NATO. And after the Warsaw Summit, we know how to strengthen NATO, but also strengthen the European dimension, which is part of the same system, as if a second leg. There is no talk about the competition. But for example, all the things that now we're doing, like providing lethal weapons. I mean, it was unthinkable a few months ago that Europe could do it. Now it's just a question of better coordinating it. And of course, a part of that strategy also is not only the European Union strategy, but NATO strategy. For example, we do not do rotating bases, but permanent NATO bases in Poland or in Romania or in the Baltic states, because of course there is also a security dimension to it. Now, when it comes to gas, and we are prepared, also because of most of the things that we've done under the Energy Union. But of course, that needs the resilience of the system and of our allies, which need providing us with gas. And of course, we need to prepare for the more difficult months, and we need European solidarity. It was announced, but now we need to put it in practice, and also the international solidarity. We are finishing the connections with the Norwegian fields, but of course we can import gas from the US, and so on and so forth. I think that President Biden just yesterday referenced it. So let's hope that we will go into that direction. And again, at the end of the day, peace is governing in Poland. So, and of course we have inflation everywhere, but more so in Poland, and this is because of some crazy decisions of the central bank, which is in the hands of the peace crony, and of course we need to also explain to the people that most of the decisions all of the decisions were taken by peace, and that they need to be held accountable at the elections that are coming. And the last thing, last but not least, the LGBTQ community. I mean, these guys, the peace guys, the government, the populist government was trying, they always need to have an enemy. And I think that they've used, because of my presidential campaign, they've used all kinds of arguments they could in order to attack me, to attack the LGBT community. And I think that they went so far that they've just ridiculed themselves. I'm just going to give you one example because not all of you have followed the Polish politics. I've signed the LGBT charter as the first mayor, for now the only mayor in Poland, to help out the LGBT community. And we've said that in this document, it says that we are going to use the WHO standards, World Health Organization, as a benchmark. What the peace propaganda did, they took a booklet from WHO written by experts for teachers, explaining how children develop, that they get interested in their bodies when they're 8 and 10, they start masturbating when they're 12 and so on. And for 3 weeks, they've unleashed this campaign that I want to teach masturbation to children at school. And that was like, the key argument that they had throughout the campaign. And of course, everyone in Warsaw or in Poznań or in Krakow was laughing like you are laughing. But in the rural areas, they were not laughing. But they've went so far that now when I go and travel around Poland and I talk to people, they know that it's just not true. Okay? So of course we will keep on defending all the minorities. And by the way, I'm not a crazy leftist, as they try to portray me. This is my job as a mayor. If someone gets by and is successful, my job is not to meddle. Because they get by. And if I have people who have problems or they're marginalized or attacked, my job is to help them because I'm a mayor, and it doesn't matter whether they're senior citizens, people with disabilities, LGBT, minorities, all kinds of minorities, we are there to help. That's a normal standard of a democratic country. And I think that we were driving that point home all the time. And I hope that we are in a different place when it comes. It will be very difficult, again, to unleash this campaign. People have heard all the arguments. And they look around and, nothing changed. I still have 2 kids, same wife, and a dog, and a parrot. And our way of life is not threatened because we've signed an LGBT charter and we say that, that we should be protecting everyone's rights and that's the foundations of the democratic society. So I think that, and many people say that, I lost the election because of that and so on and so forth. But at least, people saw that there are politicians in Poland who do things that they believe in. And that's worthwhile in itself. And we've opened doors to start discussing subjects that maybe were taboo for a while. By the way, not easy anywhere. When was the judgment of the Supreme Court of the United States on same-sex marriages? 2015? It wasn't 50 years ago. And don't get me started, okay? So, it's not that we're barbarians or we don't understand, as sometimes we hear. We just need people with guts to start debating these things. And explaining to people that this is what we should be doing, this is the right thing to do. And on top of that, explaining that there is no ideology. There are just people and no ideology, and that no one threatens our way of life. Look at the European Union. We collaborate, we build a community together, and it strengthens our national identity. It doesn't weaken it. And it strengthens not only the French identity, but also the Breton identity, and Provençal identity, also Kashubian identity in Poland. That's what we should be doing. And do you see, Italians from Florence like fretting about it? Oh, I'm going to lose my Florence identity. I will start speaking, with a Roman accent because of the European Union? No. Okay? I'm not losing my Polish identity. I'm not losing my Warsaw identity because I'm also a European. And we need to drive that point home. Okay? And I think that either you have guts to start these debates or you don't. But I hope that we've started these debates in Poland, and now we just need to hold this government accountable. Okay? And here I'm finishing. We need to keep the pressure up. Okay? Because if I see that in a Ukrainian crisis, one of the NGOs which got the biggest support from the national government in Poland is Mr. Bąkiewicz, a crazy fascist guy who's organizing those marches around Warsaw, which torch half of my city, and these guys are sometimes pronouncing words which are simply racist and so on and so forth. And they got support because they've accepted some Ukrainians, and they've got millions from the government, millions of support. And then I talked to an NGO, La Strada, who is fighting with women trafficking and with forced prostitution, and they tell me, finally, we can work. And I said, what happened? I said, you support us, but we got this additional grant from American donors, $5,000, and we can work, okay? And here I'm driving point home. I mean, please go and spread the message. NGOs in Poland need support, okay? Local government needs support. Volunteers need support. And even if the credit goes, and suddenly everyone loves Duda in the United States, fine. Let them love him. But help us, because at the end of the day, what you see in Poland, it's not a miracle. It's just solidarity, and it is the civil society, it is the non-governmental organizations, it's the charities who do that. And that's why we need to help them. And that's why I'm not in a junket, but I'm trying to convince the American public opinion, the donors, the NGOs, the political foundations, and so on, that we all need to get our act together. And that we should not lose focus from the state of democracy in Poland, because Poland needs to be a linchpin of European security. And at the end, again and again and again, Ukrainians are fighting for our freedom too, for yours too, guys. Mm-hmm. And for the stability of Transatlantic alliance, and for the values that we are preaching and we're talking about, and they are dying for them. And at the end of the day, remember that all the bad guys in the world are looking. So we need to prove to them that we are going to be tough and united, and we are going to draw the lessons, and it's not worthwhile to start wars, attack sovereign nations, attack people, kill them, rape them, because otherwise we're going to end up in a situation like we end up in Warsaw and of course in Ukraine. Okay, so that's why we should be spreading the message. And if you tell me, will the world forget? Maybe, but it's our job, guys. Yours too. Some of you are Polish, Latvian, some of you are Ukrainian, but many of you are American. Just go out and spread the message. And come to Warsaw. It's not a war zone. Help us out. Leave a lot of money. Thank you.